great to have you with us on this session looking at student housing. Quite an established asset class with, where there's been lots of opportunity in various cities on the continent, and some great providers have come to the fore, and there's some great service providers linked to those landlords. So it's quite a dynamic asset class. Obviously, there's been a bit of disruption to business, like a lot of things recently, but this is quite interesting, obviously, to dive deeper into perhaps how things are changing, have changed, and obviously where we think things could go, and also highlighting some changes in technology, etc., that have caught people's attention. So we've got a great panel with us today. So I want to welcome Alexandra, Johan, and Raghav. Great to have you with us. Just to kick off, I'd like you all just to introduce yourselves briefly. Just take something off my admin plate, and also I think it's you guys can introduce yourselves better than I could. So Alexandra, if we start with you, maybe just give us a brief insight into your background and what brings you here today. Thanks.
Cool, thanks, Sean. Hi everyone watching. My name is Alexandra Proctor. I'm the co-founder, CEO, and head of product for digsconnect.com, where we used to describe ourselves as the Airbnb of student housing, but I feel like we've kind of moved beyond that startup stage now. But that kind of gives you an overview of what we do. We're basically a platform for landlords to list their properties, and then students to go and basically find a home. So we work across South Africa, listing everything from your large-scale, purpose-built student accommodation rooms to your digs rooms, to a spare room in a digs, and kind of everything between. The whole idea being like how to find a place to stay if you're a student, based on like co-living, and yeah, that's student kind of experience.
Fantastic, thank you, Alexandra. Good to have you with us. Quite interesting, obviously, what you guys have done to the market, something new and fresh, and achieved really good success. So great to have you with us. Next, Johan, if you give us a brief intro.
Hi everyone, I'm Johan Janssen van Vuren. I'm from Eris Property Group, executive head on the student accommodation front there. Based in South Africa currently, where we're also rolling out most of our pipeline, but our feelers are out in Africa as well. We've already got offices in Africa, but on the student accommodation front, those are also things that we're looking at currently.
Excellent, thanks, Johan. Good to have you with us. Yeah, really interesting to see, a developer and multifaceted property company like Eris, obviously, for a little while now, have focused, attention and resources on student housing. Just demonstrates the opportunity there. And obviously, we've seen in SA, we've seen our REITs into the market, or on the residential side, and some interesting providers across the continent. Eris is actually where I started my career in my internship, so good to have you with us. It's a good place. Obviously, the ex-interns are some of the best in the business.
Thanks.
Raghav, if I could ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. So this is Raghav Gandhi. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at Acorn Holdings. Acorn is a developer, operator, and manager of student accommodation properties in Nairobi, Kenya. So that's actually where I'm speaking from. We currently have 3,000 beds that are operational. We've got about 6 projects that are under development. And yeah, the plan is to do a lot more. We definitely see the scope for the market to grow further. We, at the start of this year, and Sean, just taking on board what you just said, at the start of this year, we launched 2 REITs, which are specifically there for student accommodation and our student accommodation growth plan. So lots to do and lots to talk about.
Excellent, great to have you with us. And yeah, just an important point from the get-go is obviously that the focus here is Africa and different regions within Africa. Obviously, we each have different perspectives, and we've operated in different areas. and we all bring something to the table, obviously. And obviously also the success stories perhaps in South Africa may provide some ideas and inspiration for products in other markets, but not to say obviously that we haven't seen some excellent activity and there's lessons to be learned from our neighbors to the north for South Africa, and the other regions, west, east, and southern Africa, very exciting. So without further ado, I think we're going to jump in to our first discussion point and questions related to that. So obviously, just coming back to the topic, just to refresh that. So we are looking at addressing the chronic shortage in student housing across the continent and reviewing the role of tech and operational systems in creating scale. So like I mentioned, the opportunities there, we've seen some fantastic activity, but there's still a chronic shortage and there's a lot more to be done. And obviously there's certain barriers there across the value chain. We want to understand how tech and perhaps innovating operational systems can address this. So to start off, we'll spend a bit of time obviously on the more recent disruptor to economies and our daily lives and various property sectors, obviously the pandemic. So I think we'd be obviously right to touch on that, perhaps just to give a feel of current perhaps changes, impacts, and how we're moving along and coping with all the disruption that's happened. So we're going to looking specifically at dealing with a shift in demand for student accommodation due to all of this. So, the shift to virtual learning, need for private rooms versus shared rooms, this type of thing. So obviously people have had to adapt very quickly, like workers, students some have gone back home, but the student accommodation itself still needs to accommodate students on different levels and obviously ensure they have a good learning experience. So Alexandra, I'm going to pose this first question to you. Do the current levels of increased need for remote learning require any specific changes to student accommodation? And how has technology assisted with this?
So I think Africa, more so than other regions, but I think that South Africa is an interesting user case because of our 2.3 million students in the country, 800,000 are funded by government, and this is funded. And those students, come from homes which aren't necessarily the best equipped for an academic environment. It's not necessarily very academically conducive. So what we found is that, last year when the pandemic hit and a lot of students, left their residences or left their digs and went home, there was a huge demand to return back to their student housing. As soon as people kind of got lay of the land and knew that, the virus wasn't as for younger populations, kind of got to a safer stage sooner than people kind of expected. And there was a massive demand we saw from our platform, people to get back to their residences and to their digs because they're better equipped for student housing. Because for a student, university isn't just your place of learning. I mean, yeah, you can transmit knowledge, digitally through your screen, through a Zoom course, through a textbook, Khan Academy, learning online. But it's more than just that, the transmission of that knowledge. You have your tuts, you have your lab sessions, you have this interaction, you have the learning experience. And also university is kind of your next of your cultural life as a student. So your housing has to be not only suitable for the academic environment, but also that cultural experience of your friends are all there, all the activities that go around with that, the societies you're part of, the support services. Of course, you have your clinics, you have your sport facilities. So this entire experience that happens with that, while lectures don't necessarily have to happen, singing massive lecture halls anymore. And that's really exciting because now you can see that the numbers of universities can actually pump up drastically. Now that's not limited to singing the physical structure. There's all these ancillary, I'd say, experiences or add-ons that go with the academic experience to make it more holistic. Just kind of passing on knowledge, just more than that, it's this whole thing around that. So what we found actually was that there was waves of returns. So of course, now we're tracking, we're getting students coming on our platform across the entire spectrum, every LSM in South Africa, looking at every type of housing and with different funding types. So we're tracking with students coming to our platform, whether they are private paying, bursary paying, NSFAS, or perhaps funded by like an organization of sorts. And when they came back, it came back in different waves. So of course, when NSFAS students are very constrained by when NSFAS releases the amounts and how much they're going to pay. And this year, everyone saw it was a bit of a disaster because class had started. This was hand released the amounts. So students were trying to book, and the announcers were saying, okay, cool, how much, what's going on? So we had like all of like potential bookings sitting on our pipeline. It was kind of like waiting, like, when's it going to happen? And eventually they came to release the amounts. So we saw the first wave was like the private students coming through, then the bursary students, and then the NSFAS students. But yeah, I think, in terms of where this is going, you touched on the point of shared rooms versus private rooms. Because of South Africa's history saying that we want to get as many previously students through our education system. We really want to get those numbers up. The promise of our new South Africa is getting as many people educated as possible. The doors of that, like, if we want to get those numbers, it's not economical to have everyone in private rooms. I think, like, just looking at the sheer economics, if you want to build like large-scale student residence or even Diggs's, to have one person per room just doesn't kind of make sense. And I think also, I think that students didn't seem to be what we found on our platform. Students didn't seem to be too concerned with that kind of like this. Yeah, once proper safety or hygiene practices taking place, students were more than happy to kind of get back into the swing of things. So yeah, from our side, it really was a bit of uncertainty last year, but things have kind of settled back to normal mostly.
Great. You make some really key points there, I think, and it applies to our working environments, like office environments. People need physical space, and you mentioned, with university experience, learning experience, that face-to-face, that interaction for the learning, but also for the greater, the community element, the other really important connections and skills you build. The physical space is key, because there was a lot of talk last year of certain, buildings, etc., not coming back. They might just stay empty and be repurposed or something, but obviously there's still that need. So Johan, I just wanted to ask on your side, obviously that's the developer side, and you're working from a different angle. In terms of how it's had to adapt, obviously, to all these changes. And like Alexandra was saying, there is a demand, a lot of students do want to come back for various reasons. Have you seen ways that things have adapted and how technology has assisted?
Yeah, I think to just firstly add to what Alexandra said is we're not just developers, we do the property management of these facilities as well, and we've got an investment vehicle that is rolling out a pipeline on the student accommodation front. So we've been bombarded by all three sectors, the property management, development, and investment side, asking what's happening, how are we going to deal with this, how are we going to deal with this going forward, what do we have to do immediately. And I think what has happened last year was when all the protocols and everything were in place, we found students moving around illegally just to get back to res where they had Wi-Fi connections where they could work online. So there was a lot of students, especially in that NSFAS range, where they don't have conditions at home where they can study effectively online, that needed to get back to student accommodation where they had those facilities and where they could, they didn't need to share a room with 10 other people, but maybe 1 or 2 other people, and they're also studying. So we found that was a big movement. We also found that there weren't so many infections in the residences. If you look at other infections across industries and offices and that sort of thing, in residences it was very, very small, and I think it's because everybody was very concerned about it spreading and all the protocols were being followed, and everybody just made sure they looked after themselves and after each other. And then the investors obviously want to know how we're going to change this, how we're going to secure our income going forward. I think the answer in South Africa is a bit easier than the rest of Africa because of the NSFAS allowances and a big portion of our students being funded by NSFAS. But affordability across student accommodation across Africa, I think that's going to be our biggest stumbling block to roll this out. There is a market, I want to say, at the pinnacle, at the top, that can afford higher end. But if we want to approach the masses, we're going to have to really think creatively to get around that. I know Rakav and his team have got a few interesting things rolling out in especially Kenya that is also targeting a lower income as well. So there are ways of doing it, but I think that's going to be our biggest stumbling block. And I think everybody also senses that once these the vaccines are going to be rolled out, things are sort of going to go back to normal. There are a few changes that are going to stay, definitely. The sanitizing and hand washing, I think everybody's realized that it's not just good for COVID, but for a whole host of other things. And keeping some space, but especially on the youth and the students, if they're given a gap, they're going to go back to partying and being close in proximity. They're social beings. So I think it's a temporary solution, and we must be careful not to have a knee-jerk reaction to go and redesign all our buildings to have single beds and all of those things. I tend to agree with Alexandra that to get the affordability down to have single rooms is going to be very difficult.
Thanks, Johan. You've touched on some key sort of market dynamics and structural issues, which I think will move the conversation to Rajav, which we'll move on to. I mean, the fact remains there's no certainty, but I believe as well there is definitely a need to see mass, permanent changes to single rooms, and we're not going to see mass, swathes of student accommodation buildings being turned into other things. It's such a crucial need, and education is so important. And obviously our demographics, it's always the thing. I mean, there's the high-end market, obviously, like you said, in countries across Africa, but the vast majority of people have difficult conditions, perhaps in their home environment, connectivity. So it really, it's more so than in developed countries. The need for usable, safe, accessible from a cost perspective student accommodation is so crucial for social, development. So yeah, coming to you, Raghav, on this. Moving to kind of taking a step back and accepting the market will return to normal, and speaking to your experience now in Kenya, what are the dynamics there? Obviously, there's strong demand. You can maybe speak to that, and then this level of the market. The different price brackets. Where do you think the sweet spot is, and is a blended model best, or where do you see the immediate opportunity now?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Very much kind of echo and corroborate whatever Alexandria and Johan have said in terms of kind of just we haven't seen any structural shifts in terms of demand dynamics going forward. I mean, specific to your question, the 3,000 beds that I refer to that we have operational, they're actually currently targeted at the you could say like the middle income customer segment. The price range for our the typical price range for our properties is probably around $150 to about $300 per bed per night. Sorry, per month, not per night. That would be a hotel. So it's per bed per month, and the way we've I think thought about it is, and the way we are actually implementing it is the fact that what we see works best is just having essentially a different product offering for a different customer segment. So we very much see that there's scope for targeting the affordable mass housing segment, where actually our price point is going to range between I would say around $80 to about $120. So you can see it's kind of like in terms of segmentation, it's lower than what our current offering is, but that's our solution. Is that we position it as a different product offering because to what Alexandria and Johan have also talked about, you just need to make the economics work as well. There's clearly underlying demand, and based on market research we've done, and this is for our specific products, the overall market might be much larger. For the middle income segment, we've identified currently that you're probably looking at about 65,000 beds as the demand, the addressable market. And in the case of the affordable segment, you're probably looking at about 85 to 90,000 beds. right, as it stands currently. And we definitely see the scope for that to grow, because that's the thing. We're the only institutional provider of student accommodation in Kenya. Otherwise, these students are unfortunately having to go to places that maybe aren't suitable for what their needs are. And so I think as the market matures and maybe starts heading in the direction that South Africa's is in, you'll find that there's a lot more familiarity and a lot more comfort with that type of offering, and that will help students transition from the kind of random hole in the wall that they're staying in and move into to our types of properties. And we definitely feel that we definitely feel that there's going to be other entrants that should come in, because that scope is there.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, thank you.
To add to that, sorry, Sean, I don't know if that's okay if I just dive in, because I was just thinking when you're hearing you guys talk, I think even across the entire all LSMs, that affordability is the main deciding factor. Something we see in our platform is that we're getting students from all sides searching for accommodation, and the first filter they do, of course, is location. If you're studying at US Pretoria, you look at Pretoria. If you're studying at Stellenbosch, you look at Stellenbosch. But after that filter, the next filter is always price. And if you say that your max is 5,000 rand, say, then all those other things you're putting in, they kind of just fall to the wayside. You could have, if something's just slightly out of the location, or let's say you have the greatest add-ons, of course, Wi-Fi standard now, but these really great add-ons, affordability really is almost like a hard cap, I would say. There's, a little bit of play, but in a market like South Africa, even with your middle class, and perhaps even like you say, your students that are quite wealthy, affordability is still, I'd say, quite a hard cap. And that's why that is the deciding force and factor in things like, how to, I'm not probably, we're not property developers, so we're not building anything, but when it comes to kind of getting students into a space, that is, I'd say, the deciding factor across Africa. It really is going to be affordability, because even when it comes to your bursary providers or students taking out loans, they're still looking at, I've got X much money, how can I spend this?
Yeah, definitely. There's really are key points. At the end of the day, price points is key, especially when you're studying, because your main financial focus is your tuition fees, and obviously the next is you need accommodation. But if people stretch to cover their tuition fees, depending on how much subsidies they have or what their family can afford, it really is can be squeezed. And this is where we're going to move it to the technology and operational efficiencies to obviously drive, I think, delivering a better product and meeting the demand more. Because this is the thing where that price point becomes an issue. You might find, smaller landlords, etc. Not always the case, but you do get it, like you said, Rajab, providing perhaps a lesser than ideal product. So they will meet that price point, but they'll cut their cost by basically delivering an inferior product. I lived in London, and it's the same with house sharing. There was such massive demand, landlords didn't have to try. And now there's been the institutionalization of the private rented sector, which is exactly what you spoke about with student housing. So I still think, we definitely need those smaller landlords, and they need to be regulated more, which is improving, in different regions. But at the same time, the institutional players come into the market, obviously they can do things on scale. So you really need this combination, and there's somewhere for everyone to basically enter. So really, really good points there. And obviously the point is, which we've known, just to refresh, is that the opportunity is there. And also there's you can do good by doing good. So you can financially do well by providing a better product at scale. And this is what this is all about. So moving to technology and obviously operational efficiency. So this is as a mechanism to perhaps, increase profitability. So it's more appealing to investors. So you get more capital, more development happening at different levels, and obviously from the REIT perhaps to the mid private equity type of thing. Where, as a starting point, I'll start with you, Johan, and then we'll move to you two as well. Where's tech and prop tech, specifically angled at property, made the most impact in student housing, considering the whole value chain? So this is, from investment to design to listings, rentals, and operations. So obviously each of you have probably a more specific insight into one of these areas of the value chain. But Johan, where have you seen, just as a starting point, is there not much? Has there been things happening, or do you see things coming along in the tech front?
There has been a lot of things changing, and we've had quite a few presentations from different spheres, and we're also continuously looking at what everybody else is doing to see what's best practice. And the area that's had the most movement in is definitely Alexandria's area. The fact of getting leases done, getting marketing out, getting people to view units online, 3D, live, streaming, all of those sort of things have really evolved dramatically, and have been able to get students to sign up online. They don't even have to come to the premises, sign digital leases, have their deposits paid, have even their Wi-Fi registrations and biometrics almost done before they even get to site. So there's definitely a lot that's happened in that sphere. But I think where the most money is going to be saved is when the students are on site, and how the operations are managed. And currently it's extremely admin intensive process. It's instead of having one head lease in the same area with a commercial tenant, or maybe 200 residential leases that change maybe 5 or 10 every month, you've got a few thousand leases that have to be renewed in a very short period of time. So from the administration of getting that done, up to the daily maintenance, the daily tracking of utilities, and Wi-Fi. I think Wi-Fi is now top of the food chain. If your Wi-Fi goes down in the building, you'll have a riot. You can switch off the electricity and the water, and the students can still survive, but don't switch off your Wi-Fi. So on that front, to manage that and to have fail-safes in place to deal with those items, and then your security and cleaning are your next biggest cost items, and to make sure that those things are managed efficiently, have cleaners on apps and security, that you know which areas are being cleaned. Students are informed once their room has been cleaned, so that they can confirm if it has or not. There's a whole lot of things like that to increase the efficiencies of those products. But at the same time, there's a lot of tech out there that can do everything that you want it to do. But it doesn't always make sense, feasible sense or economical sense to use it. And there's so many systems that need to be integrated in a building that it's sometimes difficult to have 10 different systems, one doing your computer labs, one doing your Wi-Fi, one doing your laundry system, one doing your access control, one doing your visitor management. And sometimes when you add all of those together, then you start running into trouble on it's not actually saving you money, but costing you more money. So I think that's where there seems to be possible savings, and especially on the efficiencies. You mentioned that there are some smaller landlords that have got a place in the market, but the bigger guys can manage 1,000 beds or more quite efficiently, and the costs covered across those get your economies of scale going. So I think there's not just tech, but just the mere size of the developments will also help a lot. Sean, are you still there?
Excellent. Yeah. Sorry about that. I just had to shift closer to a plug point. So yeah, thanks, Johan. You talk a lot about, the dynamic of managing, a fully rented accommodation, residential / student building is very different to any other asset class. I think that landlords, investors have, especially at a medium to larger scale, it's something very different. I mean, just the volumes of leases, tenants, the turnover, it's a big thing, and technology has a big part to play. And an interesting thing is perhaps, I mentioned that private rented sector in the UK, so where they institutionalized and developed residential buildings for fully to be let. So they probably had some systems that came into play, and we don't have that as much in well, perhaps actually more so outside of South Africa, due to that, there's less availability of mortgages, etc., high interest rates. So the rental market is obviously quite different, but the point is, I think it's key to have a robust, sophisticated management system. And then you mentioned that the lettings leasing side, where Alexandra, people like companies like hers come in. Those efficiencies have to happen, because if it's a bit risky or messy, investors on their due diligence, they probably can't commit if the running and the leasing, etc., and the operations isn't up to scratch. So that's actually a point. If I could come to you, Rajav, on that. So from the investor perspective, the larger scale with obviously the investors you deal with, how important is it to get the management right, and then where's technology helping you, and where could it perhaps, do you think, help yourselves or other providers? And do your investors, do they ask these questions about operations? And if you speak about technology, does that give them give them more confidence in the end product?
No, I think it definitely does. I mean, how much they're looking out for it, I cannot say, because we actually just tackle it head on. We've got our own customized proprietary software, which we've developed to manage essentially the customer journey, much as Johan also spoke about, like from the, not just encapsulating CRM, but all the way to kind of like day-to-day management, looking at kind of energy and utility utilization, right? So that can be done remotely as well. And that's something that, we focus on, because that's how you maximize operational efficiencies. Ultimately, when the development is completed, it's going to give it to a certain stage where maybe you're going to be able to have a net operating income margin of around 70%. But it's the work that you do in the operational phase and being able to squeeze out that extra percent that can bring you closer to the 80% mark, let's say, right? And the closer you can get to there, the more confidence or the more returns that you are able to generate for investors. So for us, it's a key area of focus. I think it comes back to something else. We'll probably always keep coming back to affordability. Sometimes, I feel that we might fall into a trap of, innovation or design for the sake of design, right? I mean, ultimately, it's important that you also give just a functional building that does what it's meant to do. Seen in Europe, like there are innovations around, developing smart buildings or, trying to maximize, or I guess minimize, energy usage by using motion sensors and so forth. And, that's all great. It's fantastic if you can do it, but, it doesn't necessarily make the unit economics work. I'm not sure. And of course, it is horses for courses. The market is very different in Europe versus, what we're looking after in Africa. And so one has to be also mindful of your local environment. Our buildings, one of the questions I got asked during the roadshow that we were doing was, how do you control for air conditioning, right? We don't have air conditioning, so there's no need to control for it. Kenya's got a fantastic climate, and that's how we've been able to also get kind of good marks on sustainability. We launched a bond that was a green bond because our buildings are green. We can do this because we're not, again, falling into the trap of like trying to do something that's not necessary. So that's how we address it with clients.
Right. Excellent. Good to hear. And this is I think a general discussion with PropTech is, people have done it for the sake of doing it and to depict being innovative, but at the end of the day, it has to make financial sense. It has to save money on those operating costs, or make the experience better, the customer journey, in a way that you're going to get more customers. And like you say, regional dynamics, from social to cultural to demographics, that informs the product. So you can't copy paste something from Hatfield and Pretoria to Mombasa or Nairobi. So you have to, I think, be very relevant, because sometimes I think those mistakes are maybe made because perhaps also because you've got this model, it's easier to do that. But everything's different. And like you said, if someone went in and they're like, this is the spec for our building in Nairobi, we've done this elsewhere, we want aircon, etc., etc., you're going to fail, and then they'll be like, oh well, it doesn't work in Nairobi perhaps for us, but it's maybe just your approach. So that's really important. It has to make sense, has to save you money. And also shows from the other side of the spectrum is, for prop tech providers, there's a real opportunity to meet the specific needs of student housing providers, managers, developers, meet their needs head on in a sort of locationally, country-specific way. So there is that opportunity. We're going to come to the questions now. We've got some great questions, but Alexandra, definitely would like your input on this briefly. So you've touched on some great things, and my colleagues have on where that value chain, and that's that initial sort of marketing, sign-up, customer journey obviously is a crucial element. So perhaps you can speak to the main trends and maybe the main successes you've had, just in a brief way. And then the other parts of the value chain, if you have a comment on the operations, that would be great. Yeah.
Cool, 100%. So what's interesting about Digs Connect is when I started built the first platform, I was a student myself. So I was at UCT and I was studying on student governance, and I built it very much from a student first perspective. So I was sitting on my friends were students, and I was thinking, like, what do I want? And I was building tech that I would use as a student. And so the first version of the platform, this is now, we launched in Jan 2018. It feels like 10 lifetimes ago. Different world, I feel. But when I first built it, it was very much from a student first perspective. So like that. And so I think building technology for millennials and Gen Zs is really easy. Just grab on off. On our phone. It's just like what you do. Your default reaction to anything is to like take your phone out and just like for anything, it's your source of knowledge, it's your source of communication, it's your source of interaction, it's your everything is through your phone. Just a small stuff example is that on our platform, we serve our platform through web, app, and mobile, and 80% of our traffic is through mobile. So people just really like their phones. I find myself tending to be on my phone most of the time. You can almost run a business on a phone. You just can't code on one yet, but you can do most of it through them. So building, the technology for millennials and Gen Zs, and this is not only your students, but also, going up to maybe your young adults now, and it was really easy. But then recently, for the first time, I became a landlord, which was such an exciting experience. I bought like a little two-bedroom apartment, and I put my foot through the property market, not quite on the scale as my other panelists. It was a two-bedroom flat, but it kind of gave me this experience of, for the first time, this complete shift, to how's the other side of the marketplace experiencing technology. So obviously building for my digital native, but most of our landlords are, let's say, like not digital first, kind of still maybe like prefers like analog systems or pay-based systems, and not don't have that intuition or like around maneuvering around websites. So it was an interesting experience for how to build technology to make it that they give an iPad to like a child. So my test was always, when I built something for our landlords, I'd give it to my mom to test that. I'd be like, can you find how to make a digs listing? Can you find how to make a property listing on here? Can you make a property listing for like a student residence? Can you reply to a message? And if she couldn't do it, then I knew I hadn't designed it well enough. So I kind of go back to the drawing board, meet with our developers and be like, okay, cool, we need to kind of like, and it's a fantastic experience, because I think your biggest failure as a product developer in tech is when you've built something and it makes people feel like stupid or makes people feel like they're making a mistake. That's on the role of technology. Technology is supposed to make people feel happy, delighted. Technology is to optimize processes. Also, I'm a big advocate of like focus. So I can only really speak about what we do, which is how do we get students excited about your properties and moving in. Once they've moved in, signed the lease, that's kind of like the end of our experience. And one of the biggest mistakes I think I've made over the last 3 years of doing this is broadening my focus. You know, when Dixon tried to do more, you know, kind of step outside our area of expertise and be like, oh, like, you know, let's see if we can go further along the value. I feel like maybe also because we're still, you know, relatively like a young company, still new to the space, but like you kind of want to do one thing really well first before you kind of start adding on extra things. So we're still trying to lock down, like, how do we get it absolutely right so we can match up students and landlords, students and properties together really well, and just do that fantastically, and just optimize that experience and make that little part like phenomenal. So we've really honed in on our Digs Connect and optimized. Everyone's in the tech is difficult, especially if you're building for like two very different sides of the marketplace. I mean, your student tech experience and your landlord tech experience that we found was quite disparate. So now you have to serve this platform, you know, one platform to two sides of the marketplace. And of course, we also have like other stakeholders. We've got the universities that are also interested. We got a lot of college partners that are interested in the platform. Often we have parents of students signing up, and we get phone calls to our support team saying, it's asking, you know, which university I'm registered. That's not me, it's my son. What should I do? We're like, we'll just put, you know, your son's details in. Like, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, technology's role really is to just optimize these processes here. And I would say, I mean, it's interesting what Johan said about having some sort of tech solution that kind of do all parts of the building management. I thought that was really interesting. But in my experience so far, it's kind of been, I mean, maybe I haven't got to that level yet of building tech myself, but in my sort of like 3 years, it's kind of like doing one thing really well. But maybe once you've waxed that, you feel like you've optimized that and your KPIs are looking really good, you're delivering a great experience to your users, then you can start adding on, you know, extra parts of value add, but very slowly, just so you don't lose the integrity of the quality of the experience.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alexandra. And you say obviously where your focus is, you know, matching basically, you know, students, the tenants to the landlords is a crucial element for, you know, for a developer, for an investor, if they know there's a robust system there, because the demand might be there, but it's about accessing, you know, the right market, and about you know, giving them a good experience and helping them locate the right thing. Otherwise, you know, they could just be floating around. So that really is a key point, I think, in technology, you know, addressing the shortage and perhaps allowing more supply to come into the markets, is having that robust lettings, basically, you know, a letting system, which is quite driven by technology. And as you say, on the operations side, that's a whole kettle of fish. There's a lot of exciting stuff there, but you know, it should only be taken on where needed, where it makes sense. So yeah, we're going to move to some questions. I'll just got about 15 minutes. So there was a question about the sustainability of a financial model in South Africa with the NSFAS subsidies. Johan, briefly, your comments on that. Obviously, it's, you know, where you know, it takes place in other countries as well. You know, is it, you know, and then if producers or peers, you know, are landlords left in the lurch?
Yeah, so I think it's a question on everybody's lips currently in South Africa, and I think it'll be in a lot of other countries where there are grants or bursaries provided by government as well. What happens if that dries up? I think we've seen it at the beginning of this year when there was a thought of it possibly drying up. All the universities were basically stopped. So if it does happen, we think there's going to be a drastic pushback from students, and government is currently looking at alternative ways of funding it. I think it's in the best interest of the country to make sure that carries on into the future. If it doesn't happen, obviously there are still going to be a lot of students that want to go to university, and then that price point that Alexandra was talking about is going to be exactly where everybody will either get unstuck or get it right. So to make sure that your price point is right and the target market that you are catering for can still be catered for without NSFAS. I think that's the answer to that question. Whether it's sustainable or not, I think that's for people above my pay grade and in government to confirm if it is sustainable into the future. I just think there's going to be a lot of repercussions if they do just stop it once off without an alternative in place.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, makes a lot of sense, and it's a kind of a moving dynamic, and it's so crucial. But when governments and the economy is under pressure, you do have to think of different worst case scenarios, or shifting dynamics. So that's interesting. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Raghav, coming back to you in terms of financial models, is the subsidy something you see a lot in your market? And then also we've had a question on the REIT structure, which is quite unique as well. So also just to add a bit to your question is, how is the REIT sort of unlocking capital, and in your mind, and is it giving investors confidence, etc.? And do you think the prevalence of a REIT structure ultimately will help address the shortage and the demand more? And there was also a question, sorry, just another little addition. What incentives do investors have to get a dollar return in student housing? So that's perhaps linked to yours as well. So sorry to do a bit of triple whammy there.
Oh, and if, in case I forget anything, please do just whack me on the head. But in terms of subsidies, we don't get anything. We don't see anything. So that's not relevant for Kenya as much. But of course, I can see the impact of kind of the importance of it vis-a-vis the South African market. It's maybe something that could be considered, but also depends on the government's coffers, I guess. In terms of the REIT structure, the unique thing in Kenya actually is that Kenya allows for two types of REITs. There's a REIT that is what we see globally, which is kind of an income REIT, where you hold fully operational, steady state, income generating, rent yielding properties, and it allows you to do a little bit of development. That's the global context. However, in the case of Kenya, the authorities here were fairly progressive in their thinking, in that they allowed for a development fund to be to come under the umbrella of REIT regulations. And so what that enables is essentially to because we know that REITs, one of the main incentives or motivating factors behind REITs is that they have tax savings. What that means is that you can actually promote the development of housing, because as we all know, in emerging markets, there's a general housing gap, that you can actually develop housing and then also manage it within an income REIT. So you kind of address both elements. And the way we've kind of created this virtuous cycle where we develop projects in the development REIT, as and when they get developed and completed and stabilized, they get acquired by the income REIT. So one of the struggles that a lot of REITs have is in terms of getting a pipeline of new assets to grow the asset base, because ultimately that is also beneficial for investors because you spread out fund expenses over a larger asset base. But we've tackled that problem by essentially being our own pipeline feeder. So with the proceeds that are generated from a sale into the income REIT, then the development REIT continues to buy more land and do more developments. So that's the kind of the virtuous cycle working. And I think have I covered everything? I know Brian's other question was that are these publicly traded? Not yet, for the reason that one of the lessons from REITs globally, especially when you're a new issuer, is that you don't typically want to list REITs from the get-go, because you want to develop a track record. So our investor base is comprised of primarily institutional investors and a development finance institution. So they've come in. We know that there's patient capital there, there's long-term capital there, which I think is, again, essential for REITs to be successful, that you kind of align yourself with the right type of investor. And so we want to, develop a track record over the next, let's say, 1.5 years or so. And then on the back of that, depending on what we show, if we are able to instill confidence in investors, then we'll go to list the REIT, because I think then, then there's a higher chance of success. Because I'm sure what you've seen as well, particularly in the continent, is wherever there are REIT markets, the success ratio has been a bit mixed, to say the least. So that's what we're kind of let's say working towards, rather than kind of jumping straight headed. The third question was about dollar return, right?
Yeah. So, what incentives do investors have to get a dollar return?
Yeah, I guess you get a dollar return once you convert our shillings into dollars. I mean, our assets, the underlying assets are Kenya shilling predicated. So, we think we're giving an attractive return, both from a local and a global context, in terms of our offering. But we're not there to offer a dollar return. It's for the investor to make an assessment. And ultimately, like I said, we've got a foreign investor, which is a DFI, that has come in, and it was their commercial arm that actually invested, and they assessed and they found the return profile attractive enough to invest.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I know perhaps slightly off topic, but capital raising is a whole topic on its own. But thank you for the questions, and thank you so much for that great insight. There's a lot of dynamics, different parts of the value chain here, but the REIT structure, obviously something very established in South Africa, and like you said, it's getting traction in other regions in Africa with varying levels of success. But great to hear how your models worked, and also how the government accommodated that. The regulatory environment, for delivery, for capital raising, and etc., is always an important aspect. So, thanks very much for that. Got an interesting question here, and something I've thought about a bit as well, and don't have a sort of specific understanding, is operationally, and perhaps when you market, is there a difference in price and perhaps approach between undergrad and postgrad? So perhaps maybe start with Johan, and then Alexandra can touch in there. We've got only got about 5 minutes left, but it'd be great just to get an understanding of those differences.
I think in theory, yes, but if the postgrad wants to stay in the same sort of accommodation that an undergrad stays with, it doesn't really make a difference. But it's the type of accommodation more so than if the person is postgrad or undergrad. Some of the postgrads want to have a whole studio apartment to themselves, some of the undergrads as well. So it depends on what they want to stay in and what sort of service delivery they need there. Which will affect the capital cost as well as the operating cost there. Excellent.
Thank you. That makes sense. Alexandra, you're perhaps, at the end of the day, postgrad students, not like they're going to have a load more money than an undergrad. They'll probably have less money because they're studying longer. But do you see, the varying levels, and also, the diploma students, etc., or is it pretty much, everyone comes in with their parameters and finds what they can?
Yeah, there's not necessarily, I'd say, from our experience listing from Digs Connect, there's not a massive variance in the spending. So you're right in that point. You're not going to see, a postgrad suddenly spending like double the amount as an undergrad. But we've definitely seen strong preferences in the type of accommodation. So first years in undergrad, like the psychology, they're coming out of home, they're with their parents. They're really excited to get to university, look for a strong social connection. They need to make friends. It's their first year, they kind of form those bonds. They're looking for larger scale, like student accommodation. They love their residences. They're safe, they're convenient. A lot of these kids, I say kids as if I feel like I'm past that generation now. I should say my peers. A lot of your first year students have never, had to kind of really take care of themselves before, clean up themselves properly, really, clean up their own bathrooms, really cook for themselves, really made food that isn't, just future life. I mean, my first year I was living on Pernutro, so cereal. It's not sustainable, and, and then, Tiger and drinks it. So it's our first students generally tend towards on the platform because we We track and see where the students kind of go, what kind of accommodation they want. And your younger students generally are tending towards an experience that kind of gives them the full package because they just don't know what to do. They're kind of like a bit like lost in the wild. And then we find like even from like second, third, but generally postgrads really want a lot more privacy. And also they're kind of over that whole like first year hype. They're kind of serious now. They want to get on with it. Most of them have failed, 1 or 2 courses, and they kind of getting the pressure from their parents, want to get, into their career. So they're looking for like serious. They still live in like digses. So we'll find that there might be still like in a 5-bedroom digs. But generally tending towards your smaller 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartments. Same kind of price points because the residences will give you a lot more. So the price, might be more expensive there. So you get a lot less of the extra amenities. You don't get the laundry rooms, you don't get all the fun stuff. In the residence, you're looking after yourself, you clean after yourself, but it's quieter, it's more focused. It's not crazy. You won't have random people sort of coming in for digs parties or house parties all the time. And yeah, you kind of want to get it over and done with now. You might have a car by this point, so you can live further afield from campus.
Yeah.
So we've definitely seen a massive difference. And on Digs also, students are our main focus. So like 75% of our placements come from students. But we also service the young adult market. And these are your recent graduates, interns, people who have just left university, and they've got the same kind of like financial constraints postgrad, and they're actually happy to live together. So often we'll find some of our properties that we list. A landlord might say that they'll list like a 4-bedroom house, and you'll have 2 young professionals. So it's something the article, someone working their first job, and then 2 postgrads living together, and they're totally happy because your postgrads, you got your honors, master, the PhD, you can go right up, into the A bracket.
That's a really
cool. Students, living with like a first year.
It's a great point. I'm going to jump in there, sorry. But thank you so much for that. It makes a lot of sense. And those preferences obviously do change. Some things remain the same. And that's interesting. We're actually doing a co-living session later. And I think there's an interesting, marriage or perhaps hybrid between student accommodation and co-living. Because you might get a student that's like, well, I've got a job in the same area. I actually just want to stay in this. And then there's obviously, is there a need for different products? So very exciting. But yeah, we're ending off now. So thank you so much, Alexandra, Johan, and Rajab for your insights. The conversation, obviously we were focused on technology and operations. And obviously we went off to the fundamentals a few times. And it just shows you, you can't look at prop tech or technology and the real estate industry in isolation. They're one and the same. And often, the story of technology is intertwined, and it becomes, capital raising, how to structure that ownership, how to attract students and tenants, how to manage that, So I think it highlighted in this conversation that the fundamentals remain the fundamentals, and technology is and will definitely do a lot more in the future, and we're seeing it happening on the ground. But those fundamentals remain the same. And yes, there's fantastic opportunity, and it's great to hear of the successes you're each having in managing, delivering, packaging, and providing a service to the sector. So fantastic conversation, and thank you. It's also been my pleasure. Thanks to API and this great REX event. And also myself, I didn't actually introduce myself. I'm co-founder of PropTech Africa, and we're a partner with API Events in this fantastic event. And then I'm Managing Director of Diversity Property Solutions. But thank you so much, everyone. I'll hand over to you, Kafir.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean, and thank you to the panel. It was another great session, and really, it was a deep dive into student accommodation on the continent, both from a South Africa and Kenyan perspective. So thank you all for joining and providing perspectives, and always good to have yourself, Sean, moderating the discussion. So thank you to all the panelists. To our audience, we are going to now take a break for 30 minutes. The next session will start at 12 p.m. sharp. We've got 2 options happening at 12. One session focused on senior housing from one of the leaders in that space presenting on that topic. And then we've also got an excellent co-working space panel happening simultaneously. So once again, those sessions will start at 100 sharp, so plus minus 30 minutes, and then we've got those sessions and then 1 or 2 others. So thank you once again for one brilliant session to the panel, and I hope we covered everything that we needed to and took into account some of the questions coming in. So thank you, and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.